The darkness of a country night holds secrets that daylight cannot reveal. Some say the veil between worlds thins in these forgotten places, where human presence is scarce enough that other things can slip through. I never believed those old stories until that night on the dirt road between the Harmon and Westfield farms. Now, I can't close my eyes without feeling something watching me, waiting for me to lower my guard once more. The moon hung like a broken fingernail in the sky as I made my way down the narrow dirt path connecting the two most isolated properties in Adams County. I was late leaving my cousin's place at the Harmon farm, and I still had 3 miles to walk before reaching the caretaker's cottage, where I was staying at the Westfield estate. The air smelled of approaching rain, earthy and thick, making each breath feel heavy in my lungs. I'd been walking for perhaps 20 minutes when the feeling first crawled up my spine, a subtle but unmistakable sensation of wrongness. My steps slowed involuntarily as I strained to hear anything beyond the chorus of crickets and the soft rustle of wind through the tall grass flanking the path. Nothing seemed amiss, yet my body remained tense, skin prickling with inexplicable awareness. It was only when I resumed walking that I noticed the sound, a soft, wet squelch that didn't match my footfalls on the packed dirt. I stopped, and the sound stopped a fraction of a second later. The delay was brief but unmistakable, like an echo that was slightly too slow, slightly too physical. The rational part of my mind suggested an animal was tracking me, perhaps a coyote or a feral dog. I turned slowly, sweeping my phone's flashlight across the empty road behind me. The beam revealed nothing but the dark ribbon of path stretching back toward the distant lights of the Harmon farmhouse. That's when I saw them. Footprints in a patch of mud that had formed from an earlier shower. Human footprints appearing behind me, my breath caught in my throat as I moved the light slowly across the ground. There were my own prints heading forward, and then, impossibly, another set that seemed to start from nowhere, following my trail. I spun around completely, flashlight beam cutting wildly through the darkness. Nothing. Not a soul was visible in any direction. A cold sweat broke across my forehead as my heart hammered against my ribs. I told myself there had to be a logical explanation. Perhaps someone had been walking the same direction earlier, and their prints had somehow been obscured until now. But when I reluctantly turned and continued walking, I heard it more clearly. Squelch. Squelch. The sound of feet pressing into damp earth. Behind me. I quickened my pace, and the footsteps behind me quickened too. I slowed, and they slowed, always maintaining the same distance. My mouth went dry as cotton as I stopped once more and turned, the flashlight beam trembling in my white-knuckled grip. The footprints had multiplied and moved closer. Whatever was making them was gaining ground, yet remained stubbornly invisible. I called out, demanding to know who was there. My voice cracked, betraying the fear that was now coursing through me like ice water. Only the whispering wind answered. I walked backward for several paces, watching to see if new prints would appear. My breathing came in short, shallow gasps that clouded in the increasingly cold air. For a moment, nothing happened, until a depression suddenly formed in the mud as if pressed by an invisible foot. Then another. They were heading straight toward me. A sound escaped my throat, something between a gasp and a whimper, as I stumbled backward and nearly fell. The rational explanations I had been clinging to evaporated. This was not possible. This could not be happening. I turned and began to run, the cold night air burning my lungs. The squelching sounds intensified, speeding up gaining on me. My legs felt like lead, each stride requiring tremendous effort, as though the very air had thickened to molasses. I didn't need to look back to know the prints were closing in. I could feel the presence now, an oppressive weight pushing against the atmosphere around me. My phone's flashlight beam bounced wildly as I ran, creating grotesque shadows that seemed to reach for me from the surrounding fields. The steady rhythm of pursuit grew louder, closer, squelch, 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 squelch. I risked a glance over my shoulder and immediately wished I hadn't. The footprints were now just yards behind me, appearing rapidly one after another, as if some invisible entity were sprinting toward me. The edges of my vision began to darken, as panic threatened to overwhelm me. I forced myself to concentrate on the path ahead, searching desperately for the lights of the Westfield property. They remained frustratingly distant, a faint glow on the horizon that seemed to recede with every labored step I took. A strange numbness began to spread through my extremities, starting with my fingertips and creeping slowly up my arms. It wasn't the numbness of cold, but something deeper, as if parts of me were being slowly erased from existence. I realized with rising horror that the atmosphere around me had changed. The night sounds had ceased entirely, leaving nothing but my ragged breathing and those terrible squelching footsteps. The air temperature plummeted suddenly, and my exhaled breath billowed like smoke. I felt something brush against the back of my neck. Not a touch, but the suggestion of one, like the memory of fingers trailing across skin. My legs nearly buckled beneath me. With desperation born of pure terror, I veered off the path and plunged into the tall grass of the field, hoping to lose whatever was pursuing me. The grass whipped against my face and arms as I crashed through it blindly. After several yards, I dropped to the ground and killed my flashlight, pressing myself flat against the earth. My heart pounded so violently, I feared it might betray my position. For what seemed like eternity, I lay there, barely daring to breathe. The silence stretched painfully until I began to hope that perhaps I had escaped. Then I heard it, the soft swish of grass being parted nearby, moving methodically back and forth. Searching, I closed my eyes tightly, irrationally hoping that not seeing would somehow prevent me from being seen. A sudden gust of unnaturally cold air swept over me, carrying with it a scent I can only describe as the absence of scent, a void where smell should exist. My muscles locked with terror as I sensed rather than saw something leaning over me, inspecting me. The air pressure changed subtly, compressing around me as if reality itself were being distorted. What happened next defies explanation. The ground beneath me seemed to shift, not physically moving, but changing in some fundamental way. For a brief, horrifying moment, I felt as though I were sinking into the earth, becoming part of it. My consciousness seemed to expand outward while simultaneously being compressed inward. I experienced the nightmarish sensation of being in two places at once, lying prone in the grass and also standing above, looking down at my own body. The dissociation lasted only seconds, but it shattered something within me. With a hoarse scream that tore at my throat, I scrambled to my feet and ran blindly through the field. I ran until my legs gave out, and I collapsed at the edge of the Westfield property, where the groundskeeper found me hours later, babbling incoherently about footprints and followers. That was 3 weeks ago. The doctors say I experienced a severe panic attack combined with spatial disorientation, a perfect storm of stress, exhaustion, and the disorienting effects of near-total darkness, a rational explanation that I desperately want to believe. But sometimes, when I'm alone, I notice things slightly out of place in my apartment. Objects moved, doors left open that I'm certain I closed. and occasionally, in the quiet hours before dawn, I hear the faint sound of footsteps moving across my floor. Always behind me, never where I can see. And I've started finding footprints in impossible places, muddy tracks appearing on my bathroom floor, depressions in my carpet that form when I'm not looking. I've convinced myself they're hallucinations, remnants of trauma that my mind can't let go. But last night, I woke to find myself standing at my bedroom window, staring out at nothing. And when I looked down, I saw wet footprints leading from my bed to where I stood. They weren't mine. The walls in old houses remember things we'd rather forget. They absorb the echoes of the past, storing them like ancient recorders, waiting to play back at the most unsettling moments. When my niece Amanda started hearing those knocks from the abandoned townhouse next door to my mother's place, I should have taken her seriously from the beginning. I should have listened. Now, I can't stop listening to every creak, every whisper, every breath of wind that might carry that voice calling through the walls, the voice that shouldn't exist. I arrived at my mother's house on a Friday afternoon, ready for a 2-week stay to help with some repairs, while she recovered from hip surgery. Amanda was already there. My sister had dropped her off earlier that week, thinking the countryside would be good for her after a difficult school year. The air inside was stifling, heavy with the scent of old furniture and medicinal ointments. My mother greeted me from her armchair, explaining that Amanda had been acting strangely the past few nights, complaining about noises. That first night, I slept soundly in my old childhood bedroom, exhausted from the drive. The second night, around 2 a.m., the sound jolted me awake. 3 distinct knocks on the wall beside my bed, the wall that connected to the abandoned townhouse next door. My pulse quickened as I sat up, straining to listen. 3 more knocks followed, deliberate and rhythmic. A chill swept through me, despite the summer heat. In the morning, I questioned Amanda over breakfast. Her face paled as she pushed her cereal around the bowl. She'd been hearing them every night at exactly 2 a.m., she said, and sometimes a voice whispered her name. My mother dismissed it as the house settling, or Amanda's imagination running wild, but the tremor in my niece's voice made the hair on my neck stand up. The neighboring townhouse had been vacant for nearly 15 years. The elderly couple who owned it had passed away without heirs, and some legal complications had left the property in limbo. I remembered them vaguely from my own teenage years, quiet people who rarely entertained visitors. That afternoon, I circled the exterior of the neighboring townhouse. Ivy had reclaimed much of the brick facade, and the windows were clouded with years of grime. No signs of entry, no footprints in the overgrown garden path. Nothing to suggest anyone had been inside for years. A cold sweat formed on my brow despite the summer heat as I peered through a gap in one of the boarded windows. Dust motes danced in the sliver of sunlight that penetrated the gloom, illuminating peeling wallpaper and sheet-covered furniture. That night, I set up a chair against the wall in Amanda's room, determined to get to the bottom of what was happening. My niece reluctantly went to bed, while I stationed myself with a book and a cup of coffee. As the hours passed, my eyelids grew heavy. The old grandfather clock in the hallway chimed once for 1 a.m. The next thing I knew, I was startled awake by the sound. 3 distinct knocks on the wall. My watch read exactly 2 a.m. Amanda sat bolt upright in bed, eyes wide with fear. I pressed my ear against the wallpaper, feeling the coolness of the plaster against my skin. 3 more knocks, so close they seemed to vibrate through my skull. Then silence. My throat constricted as I tried to swallow. "Hello?" I called out, immediately regretting it. The silence that followed was absolute. Then, so faint I thought I might have imagined it, a whisper. "Amanda, come play." My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat a percussion in my ears. Amanda clutched her blanket, knuckles white. I grabbed a flashlight and went downstairs, out the back door, and around to the neighboring townhouse. The night air clung to my skin like a damp shroud as I examined every possible entry point again. Everything remained sealed, undisturbed. The following day, I visited the local records office. The clerk, an older woman with suspicious eyes, reluctantly pulled the files on the neighboring property. As I flipped through yellowed papers, my stomach knotted. The elderly couple had lived there for 40 years. Before them, a family with a teenage son. Nothing unusual, nothing to explain the voice or the knocks. On my way out, the clerk mentioned offhandedly that her mother had been friends with the elderly couple. They had been quiet, private people who kept to themselves after the incident. When I pressed her for details, she grew uncomfortable, saying only that there had been accusations once about a neighborhood teenager who spent time with them, who later claimed strange things were happening in that house. The teenager had eventually recanted everything, and the matter was dropped. That night, the knocks came again. Same time, same rhythm. But the voice was louder now, more insistent. "Amanda, I know you're there. I've been waiting so long." My mouth went dry as sandpaper. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees in an instant. I noticed something I hadn't before, a small, almost imperceptible crack in the wall, just large enough that if you pressed your eye against it, you might be able to see through to the other side. A crack that shouldn't exist in a solid brick wall. I forbade Amanda from staying in that room anymore. We moved her things to the living room, and I took her bedroom instead. My mother thought we were overreacting, but didn't protest. Alone in Amanda's room, I set up a recorder near the wall and tried to sleep. The knocks woke me at exactly 2 a.m., followed by the voice, angry now, frustrated. "Where is she? You took her away. Bring her back." My breath came in ragged gasps as I fumbled for the lamp switch. The light revealed something that turned my blood to ice. The crack in the wall had widened, just slightly, but enough that I could see a sliver of darkness beyond, a darkness that seemed to pulse with its own rhythm. I spent the next day researching the history of both townhouses, speaking with neighbors, anyone who might remember something about the properties or their inhabitants. An elderly man 3 doors down recalled rumors about the teenage son of the family that had lived there before the elderly couple. The boy had been troubled, he said, always talking about a friend no one else could see. He'd been sent away to some facility eventually. The family moved shortly after. That night, I armed myself with courage and a pry bar. After Amanda and my mother were asleep, I slipped outside and around to the neighboring townhouse. A small basement window, previously hidden by overgrown shrubs, had a board that gave way with surprising ease. My heart pounded so hard I could feel it in my throat as I squeezed through the opening. The basement air was thick with dust and decay. My flashlight beam cut through the darkness, revealing stacked boxes and old furniture. Nothing unusual until I reached the wall shared with my mother's house. There, the wallpaper had been peeled away, revealing a series of small holes drilled into the plaster. Peepholes, aligned perfectly with what would be the bedrooms next door. My hands trembled so badly, I nearly dropped the flashlight. Cold sweat ran down my back as I examined the holes. Some had been patched over from our side, invisible unless you knew to look for them. But one remained open, the one that had appeared as a crack in Amanda's bedroom wall. I backed away, nearly tripping over a box. As I steadied myself, my flashlight beam fell across something scratched into the wall. "I can still hear you." The next morning, I contacted a contractor to seal up the wall completely. I told my sister to come pick up Amanda immediately. I didn't explain everything, couldn't explain everything, but insisted it wasn't safe. I never returned to my mother's house after that summer. Some wounds heal, some scars fade, but some walls can never be thick enough to keep out what waits on the other side. Sometimes, late at night, I still jolt awake at exactly 2 a.m., my ears straining in the darkness, listening for knocks that never come. At least, not yet. The light moved with purpose, deliberate and sentient, across the empty schoolyard. It had no source, no explanation, just a cold blue glow that cut through the darkness like a surgeon's scalpel. I've watched it for 3 weeks now, appearing just after midnight, always following the same path toward the old locker rooms. Tonight, I've decided to follow it. 17 years as a night watchman at Lincoln Heights Public School taught me the language of empty halls. I know the natural creaks of an aging building settling into the night. I recognize the soft whispers of wind through poorly sealed windows. But what started 3 weeks ago speaks a different tongue entirely. My first encounter with the light happened during a routine patrol. A flash caught my peripheral vision. A tight beam of blue-white illumination sweeping across the cracked asphalt of the central courtyard. My first thought was trespassers, teenagers looking for trouble. I shouted a warning, but the light continued its methodical movement, as if someone invisible carried a powerful flashlight. My heart hammered against my ribs as I approached. The beam stopped moving. I took one step closer, and it vanished completely. The darkness that followed seemed absolute, almost solid in its density. I fumbled for my own flashlight, breathing heavily, the sound echoing across the empty courtyard. Nothing there. No footprints on the damp ground, no signs of entry, no disturbed locks. Night after night, the pattern repeated. The light would appear, I would approach, and it would disappear, leaving me disoriented in the darkness, skin prickling with cold sweat. My mouth would go dry, and the silence afterward felt like a physical pressure against my eardrums. Last Friday, the light changed its pattern. Instead of vanishing, it accelerated, leading me on a winding path through the courtyard toward the old wing of the school, the part scheduled for demolition next summer. My legs felt wooden as I followed, drawn forward by curiosity and dread in equal measure. The light paused at the entrance to the abandoned locker rooms, a relic from when the school housed competitive swimming programs decades ago. The beam swung toward the door, illuminating the rusted padlock I'd secured myself years ago. Then it slipped through the solid door, impossible, and disappeared inside. I stood frozen, listening to my own shallow breathing for what seemed like hours. Then I heard it. Whispers, too faint to make out words, and the light shuffle of footsteps on concrete. My hands trembled so violently I dropped my flashlight. The sound when it hit the ground was thunderous in the silence. The whispers stopped instantly. I should have left. I should have radioed for backup or simply walked away. Instead, I retrieved my flashlight and forced the old padlock open with my master key. The door groaned like a wounded animal when I pushed it open. The air inside smelled wrong, not just musty and abandoned, but charged with something like ozone and copper. My flashlight beam revealed peeling paint, rusted lockers, and puddles of stagnant water on concrete floors. But no people, no source for the light or whispers. I spent 2 days researching the school's history after that night. My muscles ached from tension, and I hadn't managed more than a few hours of fragmented sleep. In a forgotten filing cabinet in the administrative office, I found records from 1978. A maintenance worker named Edward Mercer had disappeared during his overnight shift. The police report indicated he was last seen entering the pool area to fix a leaking pipe. His belongings were found neatly stored in his locker, but no trace of Mercer himself was ever discovered. The tremors in my hands worsened as I read. The official statement suggested he had abandoned his post, perhaps leaving town for personal reasons, but internal memos painted a different picture. Mercer had reported strange occurrences in the weeks before his disappearance. Electrical malfunctions, unexplained noises, and a persistent blue light that seemed to follow him on his rounds. Tonight, I'm back at the locker room entrance. The mysterious light appeared again, but this time I arrived before it, waiting. My mouth is desert dry, and my shirt clings to my back with cold sweat. The light approaches slowly, hovering about 5 feet off the ground, exactly head height. It stops 3 feet from me, pulsing gently. I force words through my constricted throat, asking what it wants. The light flickers in what feels like response. It moves toward the locker room door, then back to me, as if beckoning. My skin crawls with goose flesh, and my heart stutters in irregular rhythm against my ribs. Against every instinct, I follow it inside. The light leads me past the lockers to the shower area, then stops at a section of tile wall. It flashes rapidly, almost frantically, illuminating a hairline crack in the ceramic that I never noticed before. My fingers trace the crack, finding it forms a complete rectangle. A hidden door? Or am I falling into paranoid delusion? The school board never mentioned any room behind this wall. The light intensifies, becoming painfully bright. I shield my eyes, feeling the wall shift slightly under my palm. A draft of stale air escapes from behind the tiles. I push harder, ignoring the tremors racking my body, and the section of wall shifts inward with a grinding sound. The light rushes past me into the darkness beyond. I hesitate at the threshold, straining to see. My flashlight reveals a small concrete room, empty except for an ancient desk pushed against the far wall. Decades of dust cover everything, undisturbed except for a single path of footprints that lead to the desk and back to where I stand. The blue light hovers over the desk, illuminating a leather-bound journal. As I approach, my ears fill with those same whispers, now forming words I still can't quite comprehend. The journal lies open to the final entry, dated October 17th, 1978. The handwriting is frantic, pressed deeply into the paper. It's gotten inside my head. I can hear its thoughts now. It needs a vessel, a keeper. I won't be the last. The blue light suddenly expands, enveloping me completely. The whispers crescendo, and for one terrible moment, I understand them perfectly. They're not asking for help. They're offering a trade. I stumble backward, my heart threatening to burst. The light contracts into a tight beam again and shoots past me through the hidden doorway. I follow instinctively, desperate to escape, and find myself back in the locker room. The tile wall has resealed itself perfectly, no trace of a door or room beyond. The blue light hovers before me one last time. Within its glow, I glimpse a distorted human silhouette, mouth open in a silent scream. Then it's gone. I've submitted my resignation effective tomorrow. But as I sit writing this account, I've noticed my flashlight flickering with a bluish tint. And sometimes, when I catch my reflection in the window, I swear my eyes gleam with that same cold light, just for a moment. I understand now. that Mercer never left, and neither will I. Not completely. Some part of me already belongs to the school, to the light. Another watchman will come to take my place, and one day they too will follow the light into the darkness. I wonder if they'll be strong enough to turn away from what waits behind the wall. I wasn't.